More backlash today for Ashton Kutcher and Mila after their video explaining why they wrote letters of support for convicted rapist Danny Masterson. The actors were criticized.
Hollywood absolutely loves a golden couple. You know, two stars who seem so in sync, so genuine, so perfect that nothing could possibly go wrong. And for a long time, Ashton and Mila were that couple. They rarely stepped into the spotlight, but whenever they did, fans couldn't help but swoon. They came across as real, down-to-earth, and totally drama-free. Effortlessly charming, really. But as it turns out, that wholesome image wasn't quite the full story. Cracks in the fairy tale started showing a while back, but most people didn't see it, or maybe just didn't want to. Then came Demi Moore's jaw-dropping memoir, which dragged up some uncomfortable stories from Ashton's past. That alone raised eyebrows, but it was only the beginning. Things took a much darker turn when their support for Danny Masterson became public, and that changed everything. Masterson, who worked with both Ashton and Mila on that 70s show, had been accused of some incredibly serious stuff, and while he insisted he was innocent, he was eventually convicted. During the trial, it came out that Ashton and Mila had written glowing letters about his character, asking for leniency in sentencing. That move shocked fans and critics alike, and it pretty much flipped their whole reputation upside down. The couple known for being good-natured and grounded suddenly looked very out of touch. And just when it felt like the fallout couldn't get any worse, something else was discovered at Ashton's place. Something big enough to send even more shockwaves through Hollywood. No one expected it, and once it came to light, the questions about Ashton's past only got louder. What exactly was found? And why did it drag his already shaky image even further down? If you thought this couple had it all figured out, think again. What's about to unfold pulls back the curtain on some seriously shocking details, stuff you probably haven't heard before. For the longest time, Ashton and Mila were the poster couple of Hollywood done right. They weren't flashy, they didn't show off their wealth or party nonstop. Instead, they gave off this vibe of being just like the rest of us, maybe a bit cooler, but still relatable. They were the kind of celebs you could imagine grabbing coffee with or chatting to at a barbecue. Their relationship seemed so genuine, like something straight out of a feel-good movie. Their story had all the makings of a rom-com. They first met back in the late 90s while working on that 70s show. Mila was only 14 at the time and Ashton was 19. On screen, they were a couple. Off screen, they were just co-stars. In fact, Mila's very first kiss ever happened on camera with Ashton. And though that sounds wild now, it was just part of the show. Back then, there were zero romantic sparks between them. Over the years, they each went their own way. Ashton became a big name in romantic comedies and married Demi Moore, while Mila kept building her career and dated Macaulay Culkin for ages. Then, after Ashton's messy and very public split from Demi, he and Mila reconnected. By 2012, they'd gone from friends to full-on dating. Not long after that, they were married with kids and looking more solid than ever. To fans, they seemed like a breath of fresh air in a world full of chaotic celeb breakups. No drama, no scandals, just two stars doing their thing and raising a family without all the fuss. But as time would show, that picture-perfect image wasn't quite as real as it seemed. Behind all the jokes and the matching beanies and casual interviews, there was more going on. Stuff they had worked pretty hard to keep out of the public eye. Then the whole Danny Masterson situation exploded, and suddenly those long-hidden cracks couldn't be ignored anymore. Their decision to back him, even after he was found guilty, made a lot of people question everything they thought they knew about Ashton and Mila. Why support someone accused of such awful things? And what did that say about who they really were behind the scenes? Almost overnight, they went from being Hollywood's lovable power couple to the center of a massive controversy. And that relatable image they had spent years building, it started to fall apart, fast. Every Hollywood scandal seems to have that one moment when things shift, when people stop cheering and start questioning. For Ashton and Mila, that moment was in 2023, when it was revealed they had written personal letters supporting Masterson. These weren't just casual notes either. They were strong, heartfelt character references asking the judge to go easy on him. This didn't sit well with the public, especially since the allegations against Masterson were incredibly serious and came from multiple women, with some claims going back to the early 2000s. Even though they said they didn't mean to hurt anyone, the damage was done. Fans were disappointed. Critics were furious. And that picture-perfect couple? They suddenly didn't seem so untouchable anymore. For years, he managed to dodge the consequences of his actions, hidden behind his Hollywood status and his connections with the Church of Scientology, which many believe helped cover up the serious accusations against him. But in 2023, justice finally caught up to him. He was convicted of 2 counts of forcible rape and sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. For many, this was the long-awaited end to a painful fight for justice. But for Ashton and Mila, it marked the beginning of their public downfall. Just days after Masterson's sentencing, court documents leaked, revealing that Ashton and Mila had both written letters in support of him. Their letters painted an entirely different picture of the convicted man, one that seemed completely at odds with the harrowing testimony of his victims. Ashton described Masterson as a man of integrity, a role model, and a positive influence on his life. Mila echoed similar thoughts, calling him a big brother figure who treated everyone with respect. This was a direct contradiction to the brutal accounts of the women who had come forward, detailing how Masterson had drugged and assaulted them. The backlash was immediate and intense. At 47, Masterson was found guilty of raping 2 women at his home in separate incidents between 2001 and 2003. The news set social media ablaze with outrage. Fans, activists, and even fellow celebrities were shocked. It wasn't just the fact that Ashton and Mila had written the letters, it was the timing that caused so much anger. These letters weren't written in the early days of the case when there might still have been doubt about Masterson's guilt. No, these letters came after the guilty verdict had already been handed down. This led many to question, were Ashton and Mila simply blinded by loyalty to an old friend, or was there something more sinister at play? Did they know more than they let on? Were they complicit in protecting him all along? The whole situation wasn't just a personal embarrassment for the couple, it was turning into a full-blown PR disaster. The golden couple, once admired for their wit and moral integrity, were now being dragged through the mud. As the pressure mounted, they did what most celebrities do in a crisis. They attempted damage control. The apology video that followed only seemed to make everything worse. The moment news broke about the letters, the backlash was swift and unrelenting. The couple, who had carefully cultivated an image of being socially conscious and morally upright, were suddenly at the center of a controversy that made people question their judgment and integrity. Fans and critics demanded answers. With no way to escape the scrutiny, Ashton and Mila felt forced to respond. So, they released an apology video. Sitting together in a dimly lit room, they stared straight into the camera and delivered a statement that, instead of calming the storm, made things even more tense. To many viewers, their delivery seemed stiff, like they were reading from a script. Their tones sounded rehearsed, and the expressions on their faces seemed oddly neutral. Body language experts and viewers alike felt that they appeared more concerned about the fact that their letters had been made public than about actually addressing the damage those letters had caused. In the video, they insisted that the letters had never been intended to dismiss the victims' experiences. They said their goal was to portray Masterson as they had known him, a friend who deserved support. They framed their actions as a well-meaning but misguided attempt to help a longtime friend, rather than a deliberate attempt to undermine the justice system. But no matter how they tried to explain themselves, the response from the public remained skeptical, and the damage to their reputations only seemed to deepen. The reasoning behind their apology simply didn't sit well with the public. Many people pointed out that the letters had been written long after Masterson was convicted, at a time when his guilt had already been firmly established in a court of law. Defending his character at that point wasn't just about loyalty. It looked like a complete disregard for the seriousness of his crimes. What made things even worse was the lack of emotion in their delivery. Instead of showing any genuine remorse or acknowledging the pain they had caused, Ashton and Mila appeared stiff and uncomfortable. It seemed less like a heartfelt apology and more like a checkbox they were ticking off, fulfilling an obligation rather than taking real responsibility. Critics quickly jumped on this, accusing the couple of caring more about protecting their own reputations than addressing the victims of Masterson's crimes. The response to the video was even harsher than the outrage over the letters themselves. Social media was flooded with comments calling the apology tone-deaf and performative. Rather than calming the storm, the video only fueled the fire, prompting people to dig deeper into Ashton's past, questioning whether his image had always been just a well-crafted illusion. As these conversations about his character spread, something bigger started to unfold. A consequence that would strip him of one of the most important roles he had carved out for himself beyond Hollywood. For years, Ashton had positioned himself as a strong advocate for victims of sexual assault. In 2012, he co-founded Thorn, a nonprofit dedicated to fighting child sexual exploitation and online abuse. The initiative earned him praise far beyond his Hollywood fame, and he was regarded as someone genuinely working to make a difference. But the revelation that he had supported a convicted rapist in court shattered that image almost overnight. Thorn, the organization he had helped build, felt betrayed. The hypocrisy was too glaring to ignore. How could someone who claimed to fight violence stand by a man convicted of such horrific crimes? As the fallout continued, the credibility of Thorn itself was called into question. People wondered if the organization could remain trustworthy with someone like Ashton still associated with it. The pressure quickly mounted, and within days, Ashton was forced to step down from the board. In his resignation statement, he expressed regret, saying he didn't want his past decisions to overshadow the work Thorn was doing. But by then, the damage was already done. Mila also found herself distancing from public advocacy, knowing that any charitable work she took on would now be met with skepticism. The scandal cast a long shadow over both their careers, proving that no amount of positive branding could undo the consequences of such poor judgment. What had started as a misguided act of loyalty to an old friend had spiraled into a massive professional fallout, one neither of them had likely seen coming. While stepping down from Thorn may have been the right move from a strategic perspective, it did little to repair Ashton's public image. The controversy had ignited a much larger conversation about who he truly was, especially when the cameras weren't rolling. As the scrutiny intensified, old accusations and troubling behaviors from Ashton's past began resurfacing. The focus shifted from just the Masterson scandal to a broader look at Ashton Kutcher's history. As people dug deeper, Demi Moore's 2019 memoir became a key part of the narrative. It pulled back the curtain on some uncomfortable truths about their relationship and Ashton's behavior, bringing even more attention to the darker side of his past. What had started as a single controversy now seemed to unravel into a far more complicated and troubling story. It didn't take long for a past controversy to resurface, one that had been largely swept under the rug when it first came up back in 2019. That was the year Demi Moore, Ashton Kutcher's ex-wife, released her memoir Inside Out, which painted a deeply troubling picture of their marriage. At the time of its release, the book made headlines for a few weeks before it quietly faded from public discussion. But now, with Ashton's character being questioned more than ever, Moore's revelations carried a whole new weight. In her memoir, Demi detailed how Ashton had repeatedly betrayed her trust, manipulated her emotions, and dismissed her struggles with sobriety. She wrote about how their relationship had initially felt like a fairy tale. She was 40, already a Hollywood powerhouse who had lived a full life, while he was 25, full of charm and youthful energy. After her divorce from Bruce Willis, she was healing, and Ashton seemed like a fresh start, someone who adored her and made her feel young again. But behind closed doors, things were far from the fairy tale they appeared to be. Moore alleged that Ashton pressured her into agreeing to certain aspects of their relationship that she wasn't comfortable with, all in the name of keeping things exciting. At the time, she went along with it because she wanted to please him. But looking back, she realized she had only done it for him, not for herself. She deeply regretted it, especially when Ashton used those very experiences as justification for his infidelity. Yes, Ashton cheated, not once but multiple times, and when confronted, he reportedly brushed it off, suggesting that because their relationship boundaries had become blurred, his actions weren't really a big deal. It was a classic case of manipulation. Moore had agreed to something she wasn't entirely comfortable with, and Ashton used it as a free pass for his unfaithfulness. But perhaps the most disturbing part of Moore's memoir was how Ashton treated her during her struggle with sobriety. Demi had battled addiction in her younger years and had worked hard to stay sober, but during their marriage, Ashton allegedly mocked her efforts, drank in front of her, and even encouraged her to break her sobriety. One night she did, and in her memoir, she described how devastated she felt afterward, blaming herself for letting herself down just to be the fun wife Ashton wanted. When the book was first released in 2019, Ashton responded by posting a vague tweet about taking the high road, implying that he could say a lot but wouldn't. Many of his fans dismissed Demi's claims as just bitter post-divorce venting. But now, with the Masterson scandal in full swing, people started to re-examine those stories and realized that Demi had been telling the truth all along. The focus shifted, and now people were asking, did Mila Kunis know about all of this before she married him? Did she know about the darker side of Ashton's past and choose to ignore it? As the conversation around Ashton's past picked up momentum, attention naturally turned to Mila Kunis. The public began questioning how much she knew about Ashton's previous behavior and whether she had deliberately turned a blind eye to the red flags. When Mila and Ashton first got together in 2012, they played up their relationship as a fun, carefree romance built on years of friendship. They joked in interviews about how they had reconnected, started as a casual fling, and let things evolve into something serious. To the public, it seemed like the perfect love story. Two people who had known each other for years, and their relationship had blossomed naturally. But as people started to dig deeper into Ashton's past, they couldn't help but wonder, how much did Mila really know about what had gone on before their relationship turned serious? Finally realizing they were meant to be together, Mila and Ashton had crafted a picture-perfect romance in the eyes of the public. But as people revisited old interviews, cracks in that narrative began to show. Clips from 2012 resurfaced, showing Mila dismissing Ashton's bad boy past with a laugh, brushing aside his history of infidelity as simply his thing. Another interview from 2018 showed her reminiscing about how Ashton had been a notorious womanizer before they got together, but she insisted that by the time they reunited, he had changed. Now, in 2024, people weren't so sure. Had Ashton really changed? Or had Mila chosen to overlook his flaws, believing she could be the one to finally tame him? Adding fuel to the speculation was Mila's silence throughout the controversy. While Ashton was resigning from Thorne and facing public scrutiny, Mila remained largely out of sight. Some saw this as a strategic move. Perhaps she was trying to avoid getting dragged into the mess any further, but others saw it as a sign of trouble brewing behind the scenes. Then came the rumors of marital problems. Divorce rumors swirled, and a mysterious man was spotted with Mila, setting off a firestorm of speculation. The couple, who had always been open about their relationship in interviews, suddenly seemed distant. Their once frequent public appearances together became rare, and sources close to them hinted at rising tension behind closed doors. Then, the sighting that set the gossip mills on fire. Mila was spotted having dinner with a mysterious man in Los Angeles. It wasn't just a casual outing. Sources claimed they looked deep in conversation, sharing serious expressions. The identity of the man wasn't immediately known, but the media had a field day questioning whether Mila was already exploring life beyond Ashton. Reports soon began circulating that the couple had been living separate lives for months, largely due to the strain of the Masterson scandal. Some sources claimed Mila had been blindsided by the sheer scale of the controversy and had started questioning her decision to stand by Ashton. Others suggested that Ashton had become obsessed with damage control, prioritizing his public image over his marriage. whether the dinner with the mystery man was innocent or something more. One thing was clear. Mila wasn't acting like someone who was standing firmly by her husband's side. And just as the divorce rumors reached a boiling point, an even more shocking development surfaced. One that had nothing to do with their marriage, but everything to do with Ashton's estate. As Ashton and Mila navigated the growing storm of public scrutiny, this new revelation added an entirely new layer to their unraveling reputations. The controversy over their defense of Danny Masterson had already damaged their credibility, but now whispers of a discovery in their estate suggested there was more to the story than anyone had anticipated. The couple had been undergoing major renovations on their California home, a project that was initially dismissed as just another routine celebrity property upgrade. However, during the construction process, workers allegedly stumbled upon something unexpected: a sealed-off storage area containing old documents, correspondences, and other personal records. While the specifics of what was found remained largely speculative, the implications were significant. According to sources close to the situation, among the unearthed materials were emails and handwritten notes from Ashton's past, some of which reportedly referenced his longtime friendship with Danny Masterson and legal matters tied to past controversies. There were also alleged correspondences that hinted at deeper involvement in certain questionable dealings, raising further concerns about his judgment and decision-making. In short, Ashton Kutcher was finally exposed. The media seized on the story, with headlines speculating about what Ashton might have been hiding. Some outlets suggested that the documents could connect him to other scandals, while others believed they might offer insight into his behavior during his marriage to Demi Moore. Whether or not the findings were truly incriminating, the damage had already been done. The revelation reinforced the growing perception that Ashton was not as transparent as he had always portrayed himself to be. As speculation spread, Ashton and Mila remained tight-lipped, neither confirming nor denying the reports. Their silence only added to the intrigue, leading many to wonder whether there was something they didn't want the public to see. The estate discovery may not have been the final nail in the coffin, but it certainly ensured that the controversy surrounding Ashton wasn't going away anytime soon. As soon as news broke about the discovery in Ashton's estate, the media went into overdrive. Every major entertainment outlet dissected the situation, trying to connect the dots. News anchors debated what it all meant. Tabloids speculated wildly, and social media became a battleground of theories and outrage. Some were convinced that these hidden documents contained proof of Ashton's deeper involvement with Danny Masterson's defense. Others believed the files might link Ashton to other controversies that had yet to be exposed. Whatever the truth was, his refusal to address the situation directly only made things worse. Instead of clearing the air, Ashton and his PR team went silent. No statements, no clarifications, just an eerie quiet that only fueled public speculation. People began questioning his past with even more intensity. Old interviews were revisited, past comments were scrutinized, and his history was reevaluated in an entirely new light. The impact on his career was immediate and brutal. Major brands started distancing themselves, and Ashton, once a go-to for endorsements and sponsorships, suddenly found himself an undesirable face in Hollywood. Not only that, but studios grew hesitant to attach his name to upcoming projects. Some quietly reconsidered roles he had been lined up for, while others outright removed him from consideration. But perhaps the biggest blow was that the public perception of Ashton had shifted from a charming, self-made star to someone whose past was full of unanswered questions. Even that 70s show, the sitcom that had catapulted him to stardom, was now associated with scandal rather than nostalgia. With Danny Masterson in prison, Mila Kunis caught in the fallout, and Ashton under scrutiny, the show's legacy was forever tainted. But the worst part wasn't the career damage. It was the loss of credibility. Ashton had built his brand on being a likable, down-to-earth guy. Now, people saw him as calculated, morally compromised, and possibly hiding more than anyone realized. As the dust settled, one final question remained. Could Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis recover from this? Or was this the beginning of the end for Hollywood's once golden couple? In a desperate attempt to rebuild, with their reputations in freefall, Ashton and Mila knew they needed to salvage whatever they could. But every attempt at damage control seemed forced and insincere. Reports surfaced that Ashton had quietly reached out to public relations experts seeking guidance on how to rebrand himself. But how do you rebuild a career after defending a convicted rapist, being exposed for past infidelity, and now facing speculation about a hidden trove of questionable documents? Mila, on the other hand, took a different approach. She stayed out of the spotlight as much as possible, hoping the storm would pass. But her silence was interpreted in multiple ways. Some saw it as her distancing herself from Ashton, while others believed she was complicit in protecting him behind closed doors. Sources claimed that Ashton was growing increasingly frustrated. He wasn't used to being in this position. He had always been the charming guy, the business-savvy entrepreneur, the one who knew how to stay ahead of the game. But now he was on the defensive, trying to patch the cracks in his public image faster than they were spreading. One of his biggest concerns was the long-term consequences. Hollywood might forgive a scandal, but when someone's entire moral character is called into question, rebuilding is nearly impossible. And even as he strategized, more people were starting to distance themselves from him. Former colleagues, old friends, even those who had once defended him, one by one, they began cutting ties. No one wanted to be associated with the fallout. As of now, the future of Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis remains uncertain. The damage done to their reputations is undeniable. The scandal surrounding Danny Masterson's case, the resurfacing of Demi Moore's revelations, the mysterious discovery at Ashton's estate, and the endless media scrutiny have turned them from Hollywood's most beloved couple to one of the industry's most controversial pairs. In the past, celebrities have bounced back from scandals, but this one feels different. For Ashton, his credibility as an advocate for victims is completely destroyed. His resignation from Thorne marked a major turning point, stripping away the last piece of goodwill that had shielded him from criticism. I just really want to say I'm sorry for Mila. Her silence has been just as damaging. Fans who once adored her now question whether she willingly ignored the red flags, choosing to stand by Ashton despite the glaring evidence of his past behavior. And then there's the marriage itself. Rumors of a potential separation or divorce have only grown stronger. Some insiders claim that Mila has been reevaluating everything, while others insist that the couple is just trying to ride out the storm. But whether they stay together or go their separate ways, one thing is clear. The Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis that Hollywood once knew no longer exist. Their story has changed, their reputations have shifted, and no amount of PR tactics or public apologies will ever bring back the golden couple image they once had. What happens next? Only time will tell. But if one thing is certain, it's that Hollywood never forgets.